Stop. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now. We have new stories every day. Now, let's go. Julian Flynn stood at the kitchen island, carefully decanting a bottle of Cabernet into a glass carafe. Through the window, Riverside's persistent drizzle tapped against the glass, creating a soothing rhythm that contrasted with the tension knotting his shoulders. He watched the dark liquid swirl, catching the light from the pendant lamps overhead. "Need any help in there?" Wesley called from the dining room, where he was adding the finishing touches to the table setting. "I've got it," Julian replied, his voice measured and calm despite the unease churning in his stomach. He glanced at the counter where Valerie's wedding ring sat abandoned, supposedly forgotten in her rush to shower and change. The front door opened, bringing the sound of laughter and the fresh scent of rain. Corinne entered, followed by Astrid, both carrying dessert boxes from the bakery downtown. "We come bearing sugar," Astrid announced, her voice too loud for the space. She brushed past Julian with barely a nod, heading straight for Valerie, who had just emerged from the bedroom. Valerie glided into the kitchen in a crimson dress that hugged her curves, a dress Julian hadn't seen before. Her dark hair fell in waves around her shoulders, and her smile lit up her face, but not for him. She bent to check her reflection in the microwave door, adjusting an earring. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She snatched it up, fingers flying across the screen. "Who keeps texting you?" Julian asked, keeping his tone neutral, even as suspicion crawled up his spine. "Just work stuff," Valerie said with a dismissive wave. "Constantine wants me to review some reports before Monday." "On a Friday night?" Julian raised an eyebrow. Valerie tucked the phone into a pocket. "You know how he is, demanding." There was something in the way she said it, a slight curl to her lips that made his skin prickle. "Hey, enough work talk," Astrid interrupted, hooking her arm through Valerie's. "Let's get this party started." Julian watched them huddle together, heads bent close as Astrid whispered something that made Valerie giggle. The sound used to warm him. Now it felt like ice water down his back. "Dinner's ready," he announced, carrying the platter of grilled salmon to the table. Conversation flowed around the table as they ate, but Julian noticed how Valerie kept checking her phone beneath the table, how her laugh seemed forced when Wesley told a joke about Riverside's obsession with artisanal coffee. She was physically present but mentally elsewhere. "Remember when we hiked Mount Verity last summer?" Corinne asked, her gentle voice drawing Valerie's attention back to the table. "You two were inseparable." "Things change," Valerie said with a small shrug. "We've both been busy with work." Julian met Corinne's concerned gaze across the table. She was perceptive, always had been. He wondered if she sensed the growing void between the two of them. "Speaking of work," Valerie said, refilling her wine glass, "I've got some exciting news." Julian waited, fork poised over his plate. "The Sakura City project finally got approved," she continued. "It's a huge account, and Constantine says it could really put our team on the map." "That's great," Julian said, the words mechanical. "When does it start?" Valerie's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, a faint smile playing at her lips. "Soon. Very soon." Later, after their guests had gone and the dishes were cleared, Julian stood at the sink, washing the last wine glasses. Valerie moved around the kitchen, tidying up with restless energy. "You seem distracted tonight," he ventured, watching her reflection in the window above the sink. "Did I?" She didn't meet his eyes, focusing instead on wiping down the already clean countertop. "I guess I have a lot on my mind. Anything you want to share?" She paused, as if considering. Then her phone buzzed again, and the moment shattered. "It's nothing," she said, checking the screen. "I'm just tired. I think I'll head to bed." Julian nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He watched her walk away, her crimson dress a splash of color against the muted tones of their home. Once they'd shared everything. Dreams, fears, plans for the future. Now she carried secrets like treasures, hoarding them away from him. He dried his hands and picked up her wedding ring from the counter. It felt cold and small in his palm. With a heavy sigh, he placed it on her nightstand and prepared for another night of lying beside a stranger. 2 days later, Julian sat on the couch with his laptop, reviewing code for a project due the following week. Rain pelted the windows with greater intensity, matching his darkening mood. The house had been quiet, too quiet, since the dinner party. Valerie had been scarce, citing work meetings and errands. Then he heard the front door open, followed by the sound of Valerie's footsteps and something heavier, a suitcase being dragged across the hardwood floor. He looked up as she entered the living room, her cheeks flushed from exertion or excitement. He couldn't tell which. "Hey," she said, breathless. "I've been running around all day getting ready." Julian's gaze moved to the large suitcase behind her. "Going somewhere? Didn't I tell you?" Her tone was light, casual, but her eyes didn't quite meet his. "I'm heading out for a 6-week business trip with Constantine." The words hit Julian like a physical blow. 6 weeks? With your boss? He set his laptop aside, focusing fully on her now. When was this decided? Valerie shrugged, moving to the bookshelf to grab a travel guide. "It's been in the works for a while. The Sakura City project, remember? We need to meet with clients, set up operations. And Constantine needs you specifically." Julian kept his voice steady, watching her closely. "He values my input," she said, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "And it's a great opportunity for me professionally." Julian stood, crossing the room to stand closer to her. "Valerie, this is the first I'm hearing about any trip, let alone 6 weeks abroad." She turned to face him, her expression a mixture of defiance and something that looked almost like guilt. "I thought we talked about this." "No." Julian shook his head. "We definitely did not." "Well, anyway," she continued, brushing her hair back from her face, "it'll be fine. Remember, we talked about an open marriage a few months ago." Julian felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. "What?" "That night after Zora's party," he said, the memory crystal clear. "You brought it up once. And I told you that's not who I am. That's not what I want." Valerie's expression hardened slightly. "Well, I thought we left it open to discussion." Anger flared in Julian's chest, but he tamped it down. Something wasn't right here, and losing his temper wouldn't help him figure it out. Instead, he took a deep breath and nodded. "Have a good trip," he said, his voice betraying none of the turmoil inside him. Surprise flickered across her face. She'd expected an argument. "My flight's early tomorrow," she said, suddenly awkward in the face of this calm. "I should finish packing." Julian watched her wheel the suitcase to their bedroom, her steps quick as if escaping. He stood motionless in the living room, his mind racing. 6 weeks with Constantine. An open marriage they had never agreed to. The pieces were starting to form a picture he'd been avoiding for months. Later that night, he lay awake, listening to Valerie's steady breathing beside him. She'd fallen asleep quickly, seemingly unburdened, while questions kept him staring at the ceiling. Who had she become? Or was this who she'd always been, and he'd been too blind to see it? Tomorrow, he decided, he would find answers. The house felt emptier than its physical dimensions should allow. Julian stood in the kitchen, coffee growing cold in his mug, staring at the vacant space Valerie had left behind. Her flight had departed an hour ago. He'd checked the airline app to confirm. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside washed clean while he remained in the murk of uncertainty. He set his mug down with purpose. Time to find clarity. Valerie's laptop sat on the desk in their home office, forgotten in her rush. She'd taken her phone and tablet, but had apparently deemed the older computer unnecessary for the trip. Julian sat down and pressed the power button. A mix of determination and dread coursing through him. The login screen appeared. He typed Huck 2019, their dog's name, and the year they'd adopted him, and held his breath. The screen unlocked. She hadn't changed her password since Huck died last year, a detail that struck him as both sad and fortunate. Julian navigated to her email, his fingers working methodically. This wasn't impulse, it was investigation. The weight of what he was doing, invading her privacy, sat heavily on his conscience, but the need to know outweighed his principles. If he was wrong, he'd live with the guilt. He found it almost immediately. A folder labeled K, tucked among work projects. Inside were dozens of emails exchanged with Constantine Aldridge over the past 8 months. He clicked on the most recent, dated yesterday. Can't wait to have you all to myself for 6 weeks. Hotel arrangements confirmed. Adjoining rooms with a connecting door. No one will know. Julian's jaw clenched, but he kept reading. The emails grew more explicit as he scrolled back through time, detailing encounters in Constantine's office, a weekend trip disguised as a conference, plans for their upcoming business trip. Interspersed among the personal messages were financial documents, Q3 reports, budget adjustments, account transfers. One report caught his eye. Q3 adjustments draft. He opened it, scanning the columns of numbers. His background in software engineering, often involving data analysis, allowed him to spot the discrepancies quickly. Amounts that didn't reconcile, funds transferred to accounts listed only by number, dates that aligned perfectly with Valerie and Constantine's so-called business meetings. He downloaded the files to his own secure cloud storage, then methodically went through their messaging history, taking screenshots of the most damning exchanges. The evidence mounted. Valerie wasn't just cheating. She was complicit in embezzlement. The betrayal cut deeper than he'd imagined possible. This wasn't just about their marriage. It was about her character, her willingness to compromise not just their relationship but her integrity, her career, the law itself. Julian leaned back in the chair, a strange calm settling over him. The uncertainty was gone, replaced by cold, hard facts. He knew now exactly what he was dealing with. "You've made your choice, Valerie," he said aloud to the empty room, his voice devoid of emotion. "Now I'll make mine." He closed the laptop and stood, plans already forming in his mind. She thought she was escaping to a 6-week paradise with her lover, building a new life in the ruins of their marriage. Instead, she had given him 6 weeks to dismantle everything she cared about. He wouldn't yell, plead, or waste tears on someone who had none for him. Instead, he would be methodical, precise, and utterly ruthless. Julian pulled out his phone and sent a text to Wesley. "Need to meet. It's important." Then he started making lists of accounts to secure, assets to protect, evidence to compile, and people to contact. By the time Valerie returned, there would be nothing left for her to come back to. Rain tapped against the windows of Miriam Rice's downtown office, the drops racing each other down the glass like tears. Julian watched their paths, absently tracking their progress while he waited for the divorce lawyer to finish reviewing the documents he provided. Miriam, a sharp-featured woman with steel-gray hair and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, finally looked up from the stack of papers. "Well," she said, her voice as crisp as her tailored suit, "you've been thorough." "I believe in preparation," Julian replied, turning his attention from the window to meet her gaze. Clearly, she removed her glasses, letting them hang from a chain around her neck. "I see evidence of infidelity, which, while Brimfield is a no-fault jurisdiction, can influence asset division if it can be shown her actions led to the dissipation of marital assets. And the financial documents." Miriam's expression hardened. "That's where things get interesting. If your wife is indeed involved in embezzlement, as these records suggest, we have significant leverage, not just for the divorce proceedings but potentially for criminal charges. I want her out of my life," Julian said, his voice low but firm. "And I want everything I've worked for protected." "Understandable." Miriam nodded. "First step is to secure your finances. Separate accounts, freeze joint credit lines, document all assets." "Have you done this yet?" "Started, but not completed." "Do it today." She shuffled the papers back into a folder. Next, we prepare the filing. Given what you've shown me, I recommend we wait until your evidence of the embezzlement is in the hands of the proper authorities. That way, she'll be fighting on two fronts, criminal and civil. How long will all this take? Divorce. Minimum 6 months in Brimfield, but the financial separation and protection can happen immediately. She leaned forward, her expression softening slightly. Mr. Flynn, I've been doing this for 20 years. The clients who fare best are the ones who act decisively and maintain emotional distance. Can you do that? Julian met her gaze steadily. Yes. Good. She handed him a business card. My cell is on the back. Call anytime, day or night. This is going to get messy, but I'm good at cleaning up messes. As Julian stood to leave, Miriam added, and Mr. Flynn, document everything from now on. Every communication, every financial move, every suspicious activity. The more ammunition we have, the better. Outside, the rain had intensified, matching Julian's darkening resolve. He pulled up his collar against the downpour and walked to his car, a plan forming with each step. Valerie had made the first move, but he would make the last. The rusty nail was dimly lit and smelled of beer and decades of hushed conversations. It was the kind of place where secrets could be shared without fear of being overheard, which was exactly why Julian had chosen it for his meeting with Wesley. He spotted his friend at a corner booth, 2 beers already on the table. Wesley's usually cheerful face was set in serious lines as Julian slid into the seat across from him. You look like hell, Wesley said by way of greeting, pushing one of the beers toward him. Feel like it too. Julian took a long drink, welcoming the bitter taste. So what's this about? Your text sounded ominous. Julian set the beer down and met his friend's concerned gaze. Valerie's been cheating on me, with her boss, Constantine. Wesley's expression darkened. And they're stealing from the company. Embezzlement. I found financial reports, doctored numbers, offshore accounts. Wesley let out a low whistle. That's next-level betrayal, man. What are you gonna do? End it, Julian said, his voice trembling slightly with controlled fury. All of it. The marriage, her career, her freedom if it comes to that. I've already seen a lawyer. I'm separating our finances tomorrow, and after that, I'm getting out, changing the locks, moving my stuff, disappearing from her life before she gets back from her little vacation. Wesley nodded slowly. You need a place to crash. No. I've got a line on an apartment across town, but I could use help moving some things. Consider it done. Wesley's loyalty shone through his serious expression. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, just say the word. Thanks, Julian said simply, though the word felt inadequate. So, what's the timeline here? When do you pull the trigger? Julian took another drink, his mind calculating. I need about a week to get everything in order. Financial separation, new place secured, evidence compiled. Then I start the dominoes falling. And Valerie has no idea. None. She thinks I bought her open marriage lie. A bitter smile twisted Julian's lips. She claims we discussed it months ago. She rewrote history to justify what she wanted to do anyway. Wesley's expression hardened. That's manipulation, plain and simple. She's good at it. Always has been. I see that now, Julian said with a sigh, the weight of realization heavy on his shoulders. I was blind, Wes. For years. Don't beat yourself up. You trusted her because that's what marriage is supposed to be about. Not anymore. Julian's voice hardened. Now it's about survival. And justice. To survival, then. Wesley raised his glass. Julian clinked his against it. And to justice. They drank in silence for a moment, the background murmur of the bar filling the space between them. You know, Wesley finally said, in all the years I've known you, I've never seen you like this. You've always been the calm one, the reasonable one. That Julian died when he read those emails. He met his friend's gaze unflinchingly. I can't forgive this, Wes. Not ever. I'm not asking you to. Hell, I wouldn't either. Wesley leaned forward. Just make sure whatever you do, you protect yourself first. Don't let the anger drive you to make mistakes. That's why I'm planning everything carefully, cold and calculated, just like they were. Wesley nodded, then picked up his phone. Let me put moving day on my calendar. What are you thinking? This weekend? Saturday. I'm there. Wesley put his phone away and raised his glass again. To new beginnings, and to reminding Valerie Flynn that actions have consequences. To consequences, Julian echoed, the word tasting like a promise on his tongue. The yoga studio was housed in a converted warehouse, its industrial exterior belying the serene space within. Julian checked the schedule posted by the entrance. Advanced Vinyasa with Diana. 4:30 p.m. He glanced at his watch. 4:45. Class would be ending soon. He waited outside, watching the rain collect in puddles on the sidewalk. The door opened, and people began filing out, rolled mats tucked under their arms, faces flushed from exertion. Finally, he spotted her, Diana Aldridge, tall and elegant even in simple yoga attire, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She was speaking with a student, smiling as she offered advice. Julian approached once the student had left. Diana Aldridge. She turned, regarding him with curious eyes. Yes, my name is Julian Flynn. I need to speak with you. It's about your husband. Her expression shifted, wariness replacing curiosity. Constantine Aldridge. What about him? Not here, Julian said, glancing around. It's sensitive. Diana studied him for a moment, then nodded. I have time before my next class. There's a cafe around the corner. They walked in silence, tension building with each step. The cafe was quiet, with only a few tables occupied. They found a corner spot far from other patrons. So, Diana said once they were seated, her accent slight but noticeable, flavoring the word. What is this about Constantine? Julian met her gaze directly. Your husband is sleeping with my wife. And they're stealing from your company. Diana's face paled, then flushed with anger. That's a serious accusation. What proof do you have? Without a word, Julian reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. He placed it on the table between them and opened it to reveal printed emails, photos, and financial documents. These are emails between them, going back 8 months, he explained, voice steady. The photos were attachments, and these, he pointed to the financial papers, are records of funds they've been diverting to offshore accounts. Over $200,000 so far. Diana's hands trembled slightly as she picked up one of the emails. Her eyes scanned the text, widening at the explicit content. She set it down and looked at the financial documents, her business acumen evident in the way she quickly processed the information. That bastard, she finally said, her accent thickening with emotion. I knew something was off. He's been distant, working late, taking trips. I tried to talk to him about it, but he made me feel paranoid, like I was imagining things. Gaslighting, Julian said quietly. Valerie does the same to me. Diana looked up at him, her eyes hardening. Why are you showing me this? What do you want? I'm ending my marriage, Julian said simply. Valerie and Constantine are in Sakura City right now, on a so-called business trip that's really a 6-week affair. When they return, I want them to find nothing but ruins. Ruins? Diana repeated, testing the word. You mean you want revenge? I mean I want justice, Julian clarified. They betrayed us both. And they're stealing from the company you built together. I have the technical skills to trace the money. You have insider knowledge of Constantine's passwords, accounts, habits. Together, we can expose them completely. Diana was silent for a long moment, staring at the evidence spread before her. Then she straightened her shoulders, a new resolve evident in her posture. Constantine built the company on my family's money, she said, her voice cold. When we married, I invested everything I had in his vision. If he's stealing from it, he's stealing from me directly. So you'll help?" "Yes." The single word carried the weight of a vow. "I'll help you burn it all down." Julian felt the first real satisfaction since discovering Valerie's betrayal. "We'll need to work quickly. I've already started separating our finances, looking for a new place. Next step is compiling all the evidence into an airtight case. I can provide his passwords," Diana said, already taking out her phone. "He uses the same ones for everything: our anniversary, our address. So predictable." She laughed without humor. "And I have access to all our company accounts. I'm still listed as CFO, even though I stepped back to teach yoga." "Perfect," Julian nodded. "We'll be careful. Leave no traces of our investigation. I know how to be discreet." Diana's smile was sharp-edged. "When do we start?" "Now," Julian said. "Right now." Julian's home office had become command central for Operation Takedown, as Wesley had jokingly dubbed it. Boxes lined the walls, filled with books and personal items he'd started packing. His desk was covered with printouts, 2 laptops, and empty coffee mugs. Diana sat beside him, her posture still yoga perfect despite the hours they'd spent compiling evidence. On the screen, financial records flashed by as Julian's program traced the movement of funds. "There," he said, pointing to a transaction. "That's the 3rd offshore account, Cayman Islands, registered to a shell company called Blue Horizon Ventures." Diana leaned closer, eyes narrowed. "Constantine set that up 3 years ago. He told me it was for international expansion." She made a note in her already substantial file. The deposit dates match their hotel stays in Haven Springs and Cumberland. "And look at this." Julian brought up another screen. These expense reports were doctored. The original versions show much lower amounts, but the final submissions to accounting have inflated figures. "The difference is exactly what's showing up in the offshore accounts." "Sloppy," Diana muttered. "He always was careless with details. That's why he needed Valerie. She's good with numbers. Good with lies, too," Julian added, bitterness edging his voice. "We have enough," Diana said, gathering the printouts. "More than enough. Time to move to the next phase." Julian nodded, turning to his second laptop. "I've drafted an anonymous tip to the company board. All the evidence is attached, organized chronologically with annotations explaining the significance of each item. Add this." Diana handed him a flash drive. "Board member contact information, including private emails. Send it to all of them, not just the chairman. Constantine has too much influence over him." Julian plugged in the drive and copied the information. "Should we include the Riverside PD?" "Absolutely." Diana's voice was firm. "This is criminal activity. They need to be involved from the start." Working together, they finalized the email, attached all the evidence, and created an anonymous account for sending it. Julian's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Once I hit send, there's no going back." Diana placed her hand on his arm, her touch light, but her grip firm. "They didn't hesitate to betray us. Why should we hesitate to expose them?" With a nod, Julian pressed send. They watched the progress bar fill, then the confirmation message. Email delivered. Diana's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water bottle. "He'll never see this coming. He thinks he's untouchable." "So does Valerie," Julian said, his voice cold. "She thinks I'm sitting here waiting for her to return, that I'll accept whatever crumbs of attention she decides to throw my way after her affair." "What's your next step?" Diana asked. "The most painful punishment." "It's not about punishment," Julian clarified. "It's about justice and freedom." "Freedom," Diana repeated, the word almost a sigh. "I haven't felt that in years." Julian looked at her, really seeing her for the first time beyond their shared mission. The strain around her eyes, the tension in her shoulders despite her yoga practice, the way she twisted her wedding ring unconsciously, all signs of a woman who had been carrying a heavy burden. "What will you do?" he asked, "after this is over?" I don't know, she admitted. The yoga studio is mine. The house, we'll see. But my family has property in Valmont. I might go there for a while. Once the dust settles, a fresh start. Yes, she smiled slightly. A chance to remember who I was before Constantine, before I became an accessory to his life, rather than a person in my own right. She gathered her things, preparing to leave. What about you? I haven't thought beyond the next few weeks, Julian admitted. Getting through this is taking all my focus. You'll find your way, Diana said with conviction. You're stronger than you realize. As she left, Julian turned back to his computer, checking his bank accounts. The transfers he'd initiated were complete. His savings moved to a new account Valerie had no access to. Tomorrow, he'd liquidate their joint investments, taking his half before she could drain them. The rain had stopped. He noticed. The world outside his window looked clearer, brighter. Perhaps Diana was right. Perhaps he was stronger than he knew. The doorbell rang as Julian was labeling another box of books. He checked his watch. Too early for Wesley, who wasn't due until tomorrow. Setting down the marker, he made his way to the front door. Corinne stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself as though cold despite the mild temperature. Her expression was troubled, eyes darting to the boxes visible in the living room behind him. Hey, he said, stepping back to let her in. This is a surprise. I tried calling, she said, moving past him into the house. You didn't answer. Been busy. He closed the door and followed her. What's up? Corinne turned to face him, her gentle features set in uncharacteristic determination. What's going on, Julian? Why are you packing? I'm moving out. He saw no reason to soften the truth. Valerie and I are done. Because of her trip. Corinne's brow furrowed. She told me it was a big opportunity for her career. I know 6 weeks is a long time, but it's not about the trip. Julian cut her off, his patience thinning. It's about who she's with and what they're doing. She's having an affair with Constantine. Has been for months. Corinne's hand flew to her mouth. No, she wouldn't. She is. His voice was flat. I have proof. What proof? There was a plea in her voice, a desperate hope that he was wrong. Without a word, Julian walked to his desk and picked up a folder, a duplicate of the one he'd shown Diana. He returned to the living room and handed it to Corinne. It's all there, he said as she opened it with trembling hands. Emails, photos, hotel receipts, 8 months of lies. Corinne's face crumpled as she flipped through the pages. I don't understand, she whispered. She seemed so happy at dinner last week. She was happy, Julian said, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Just not with me. Corinne looked up, tears welling in her eyes. Maybe it's just a phase. People make mistakes, Julian. Marriages go through rough patches. It's not just the affair. He took the folder back and pointed to the financial documents. They're stealing from their company, embezzling funds, cooking the books. This goes beyond a rough patch, Corinne. This is criminal. She stared at the papers, then at the boxes lining the walls. So you're just leaving? Without talking to her, without trying to work it out? There's nothing to work out. She made her choice long before she got on that plane. She lied to my face, manipulated me, betrayed everything our marriage was supposed to stand for. She's my sister, Corinne said softly, a tear rolling down her cheek, and she was my wife. The past tense hung between them, heavy with meaning. Corinne wiped her eyes, conflicted loyalty evident in her expression. What are you going to do? Move on. He gestured to the boxes. Wesley's helping me move tomorrow. I got a new place. By the time Valerie gets back, I'll be gone. And the evidence about the money, already sent to the company board and the police. Corinne gasped. Julian, that could destroy her career, her life. She destroyed mine, he said, voice hard. Actions have consequences, Corinne. It's time Valerie faced hers. She looked at him as if seeing a stranger. I never thought you could be so cold. Neither did I, he admitted. But I never thought she could be so callous either. People change when they're betrayed. Corinne was silent for a long moment, struggling with the reality before her. Finally, she asked, "Do you need any help with the moving?" The offer surprised him. "You'd help me leave your sister." "I love Valerie," Corinne said, her voice steadying. "But what she did was wrong. Inexcusable." She looked around at the half-packed house. "And you've always been like a brother to me. That doesn't just disappear because my sister made terrible choices." Gratitude washed over Julian, unexpected and powerful. "Thank you," he said, "but Wesley and I have it covered." "I appreciate the offer, though." She nodded, then wrapped her arms around him in a quick, fierce hug. "Take care of yourself, Julian. And I'm sorry for all of it." "Me too," he whispered, returning the embrace briefly before stepping back. As Corinne left, Julian returned to his packing, the weight on his shoulders somehow lighter despite the difficult conversation. He hadn't expected support from Valerie's family. It was a small victory in the midst of so much loss. The apartment was small but clean, with large windows that let in plenty of light. Julian stood in the empty living room, surveying the space that would become his new home. Wesley appeared in the doorway, carrying the last box from the truck. "That's everything," he announced, setting the box down with a thump. "Your life in 20 cardboard containers. Pretty minimal for a guy in his 30s. Julian smiled faintly. "I left a lot behind. Furniture, appliances, anything we bought together. Clean break." Wesley nodded in understanding. "Smart move." They began arranging the boxes against the wall, organizing them by room and priority. Julian had rented basic furniture, a bed, a couch, a desk, that would be delivered tomorrow. For tonight, he had an air mattress and essential kitchenware, enough to begin again. "So," Wesley said as they finished, "what's left on the checklist?" "Just one thing." Julian pulled an envelope from his pocket. "The letter." Wesley raised an eyebrow. "You're really gonna do it? Just leave a note." "It's more than she deserves," Julian said, his voice hardening. "But yes, one final message before I vanish from her life." They drove back to the house in silence, each lost in thought. The place that had been home for 5 years now felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. Julian walked through each room one last time, making sure he hadn't forgotten anything important. In the kitchen, he placed the envelope on the bare table, the only furniture piece remaining. Inside was a single page, his message direct and unambiguous. "Valerie, I know about Constantine, the affair, the money. I never agreed to an open marriage. You lied. I've taken what's mine and left you to rot. Enjoy the fallout." Then Julian placed his wedding ring, snapped in half with pliers, beside the envelope. The clean break was symbolic of his resolve. There would be no reconciliation, no forgiveness, only consequences. "Ready?" Wesley asked from the doorway. Julian took one last look around, memories washing over him. Their first dinner in this kitchen. Lazy Sunday mornings, plans made, and dreams shared, all poisoned now by the knowledge of her betrayal. "Ready," he confirmed, turning away from the past. Outside, rain had begun to fall again, soft and cleansing. Julian locked the door one final time, then dropped his keys through the mail slot. The sound of them hitting the floor inside echoed with finality. "To new beginnings," Wesley said, clapping him on the shoulder. Julian nodded, sliding into the passenger seat of Wesley's truck. As they pulled away from the curb, he didn't look back. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He would never again allow himself to be so thoroughly deceived. The rain washed down the windshield, blurring the world outside. Somewhere in Sakura City, Valerie was with Constantine, thinking her life was proceeding according to plan. She had no idea what awaited her return. Julian closed his eyes, feeling something like peace for the first time since discovering her betrayal. The confrontation phase was complete. Now he would wait for the resolution. The arrivals terminal at Riverside International Airport buzzed with activity. Valerie Flynn, tanned and tired, wheeled her suitcase through the automatic doors, scanning the pickup area for Julian's familiar car. She had texted him her arrival time before boarding in Sakura City, certain he would be there despite their parting tension. The curb was lined with vehicles, but none she recognized. She checked her phone. No messages, no missed calls. With a sigh of irritation, she headed for the taxi stand. Riverside Heights, she told the driver, settling into the back seat. Willow Street. During the ride, she stared out at the familiar streets, a mixture of satisfaction and guilt churning in her stomach. The trip had been everything she'd hoped. Exciting workdays followed by passionate nights with Constantine. He promised a future together once they'd secured enough funds. Just a few more transfers, a few more manipulated reports, and they'd have their nest egg. Still, as the taxi approached her neighborhood, unease crept up her spine. 6 weeks was a long time. Julian had seemed too calm when she left, too accepting of her flimsy excuse about an open marriage. It wasn't like him. The taxi stopped in front of her house. Valerie paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk, taking in the darkened windows. Strange, it was evening, but not late. Julian should be home from work by now. She unlocked the front door and stepped inside, calling out, "Julian, I'm home." Silence greeted her. She flipped on the lights and froze. The entryway was bare, the console table gone, the wall art missing. Heart racing, she moved farther into the house. Each room revealed more emptiness. The living room furniture remained, but all personal items, photos, books, the throw blanket Julian's mother had made were gone. "Julian," she called again, her voice echoing in the half-empty space. The kitchen was entirely bare except for the table, stripped of its cloth. The chairs gone, with an envelope and something small beside it. She approached slowly, dread building with each step. The small object was Julian's wedding ring, snapped cleanly in half. Her hand trembled as she picked up the envelope and opened it. The message was brief, brutal in its simplicity. Her knees weakened as she read it, then read it again, the words burning in her consciousness. She sank to the floor, the letter clutched in her hand, alone in the shell of what had once been their home. "He's gone." Valerie paced her living room, foam pressed to her ear. "He packed up and vanished. Left me a note, broke his wedding ring, and disappeared." "Calm down." Astrid's voice sounded strange, distant on the line. "What exactly did the note say?" "That he knows everything. About Constantine. The affair. The money." Valerie's voice dropped on the last word. There was a pause before Astrid responded. "What did you expect, Val? That he'd welcome you home with open arms after you spent 6 weeks with your boss?" Valerie stopped pacing, thrown by her friend's tone. "I thought we'd talk, work something out. He's always been reasonable." "Reasonable?" Astrid's laugh was bitter. "You lied to his face, told him you had an open marriage when you didn't, then left him for 6 weeks while you played in Sakura City. There's nothing reasonable about expecting him to accept that. Whose side are you on?" Valerie demanded. "I was on yours," Astrid said, emphasis on was. "But Julian told everyone. Val, Wesley, Corinne, me. Your open marriage excuse didn't fly. He showed us proof." "Proof, Valerie. Emails, photos, hotel receipts, detailed stuff. Things no one should have to see about their spouse." Valerie sank onto the couch, her legs giving out. "He went through my computer. And you're surprised? You gave him every reason to be suspicious." Astrid's voice hardened. "And Constantine's in jail, by the way." "What?" The word came out as a gasp. "Arrested 3 days ago. Embezzlement. It's all over the news. He's radioactive now. Nobody's touching him, or anyone associated with him." The implications hit Valerie like a physical blow. "I need to call work," she murmured, more to herself than to Astrid. "Good luck with that," Astrid said, her voice now openly hostile. "I got to go. Don't call me for a while, Val." I need time. The line went dead, leaving Valerie staring at her phone in disbelief. Her friend, her oldest friend, had just cut her off. And Constantine was in jail. And Julian was gone. Her world was collapsing around her, the carefully constructed lies crumbling like sandcastles in the tide. With shaking fingers, she called her office. The next morning, Valerie strode through the doors of Flynn Aldridge Marketing with her head held high, projecting a confidence she didn't feel. The receptionist's eyes widened at the sight of her, then quickly looked down, avoiding eye contact. "Good morning, Britt," Valerie said, forcing a bright tone. "Is Camille in? I need to check in now that I'm back." Britt's discomfort was palpable. "She's in, but..." "Perfect, I'll head right up." Valerie moved toward the elevator before the receptionist could stop her. The office floor was buzzing with activity, but a strange hush fell as she walked through. Colleagues who normally greeted her warmly suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. Others whispered behind their hands, eyes following her progress to Camille's office. She knocked on the door, then entered without waiting for a response. "Camille, I'm back from Sakura City," and closed the door. Camille's tone was clipped. Valerie complied, then took a seat across from her manager. "Is something wrong? I know Constantine's situation is complicated right now, but our project was a success and..." "Stop." Camille held up a hand. "There was no legitimate project in Sakura City, Valerie. We know that now." Valerie's mouth went dry. "I don't understand. The company received evidence, extensive evidence, of financial impropriety by Constantine Aldridge and you," Camille said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Bank transfers, doctored reports, falsified expense claims. Your fingerprints are all over this." "That's ridiculous," Valerie protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "I was just following Constantine's direction, handling paperwork. I didn't know. Your personal emails suggest otherwise." Camille's voice was cold. "The board has placed you on administrative leave, pending a full investigation. Your company accounts have been frozen, and we've been instructed to cooperate fully with the Riverside Police Department." "The police?" Valerie whispered. "This is a criminal matter now, Valerie. Embezzlement. Fraud." Camille stood. "Security will escort you out. Please surrender your badge and company phone." Valerie remained seated, shock rendering her immobile. "You can't do this. I've been with the company for 7 years. I built the social media department from nothing. And now you've destroyed your reputation in 7 weeks." Camille said, her face showing a flicker of regret before hardening again. "Actions have consequences, Valerie. It's time to face yours." As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared at the door. Valerie looked from them to Camille, the full impact of her situation finally hitting her. This wasn't just about her marriage anymore. Her career, her freedom, everything was at risk. "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be," Camille said quietly. With trembling hands, Valerie removed her badge and placed it on the desk along with her company phone. The security guards flanked her as she walked through the office, past the staring eyes, and whispered comments of her colleagues. Outside the main doors, one guard said, "You'll be contacted about when you can retrieve your personal belongings." Then they were gone, leaving her alone on the sidewalk. Across the street, a news van pulled up, a reporter and cameraman emerging with purpose. Someone had tipped them off. Valerie turned and walked quickly in the opposite direction, head down, the reality of her situation pressing on her with each step. Julian hadn't just left her. He'd orchestrated her complete destruction. In his new apartment, Julian sat at his desk, watching the local news on his laptop. The reporter stood outside Flynn Aldridge Marketing, explaining the unfolding scandal. Constantine Aldridge, co-founder and CEO of Flynn Aldridge Marketing, remains in custody following his arrest on charges of embezzlement and fraud. Sources close to the investigation indicate that over $200,000 was diverted to offshore accounts over the past 2 years. Additional arrests are expected as authorities continue to unravel the extent of the financial misconduct. The screen showed footage of Konstantin being led into the courthouse in handcuffs, then cut to a blurry image of Valerie hurrying away from the building, head down. Among those implicated is Valerie Flynn, senior marketing coordinator and wife of the company's other co-founder, Sean Flynn, who sold his interest in the firm 3 years ago. Ms. Flynn has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Neither she nor her attorney has commented on the allegations. Julian closed the laptop, a complex mixture of emotions washing over him. There was satisfaction, seeing justice served, watching the consequences unfold, but there was also a hollowness, an echo of the pain that had driven him to this point. A knock at the door broke his reverie. Wesley entered, carrying a 6-pack of beer and a pizza box. "Housewarming," he announced, setting the food on the kitchen counter. "Figured you could use some company." "Thanks," Julian said, genuinely grateful for the distraction. They settled on the couch, pizza slices in hand, beer bottles open. The apartment was coming together, furniture arranged, books unpacked, a new television mounted on the wall. The physical trappings of his new life were taking shape. "Saw the news," Wesley said after a few bites. "Konstantin's looking at serious time. 5 to 10 years minimum." Julian nodded. "And Valerie?" "Harder to say. Depends on how much they can prove she knew, how actively involved she was." Wesley took a swig of beer. The DA might offer her a deal to testify against Konstantin. "She'll take it," Julian said without hesitation. "She always looks out for herself first." They ate in companionable silence for a while, the city lights twinkling through the windows as evening descended. "You okay?" Wesley finally asked. "Really okay, I mean." Julian considered the question, wanting to give an honest answer. "I'm getting there," he said slowly. "The anger isn't as raw. It's more focused now. That's progress, I guess." Wesley handed him another beer. "You know what you did. It was ruthless, calculated. I've never seen that side of you before." "Neither had I," Julian admitted. "But I couldn't let them win. I couldn't just be the victim in their story." "To fresh starts." Wesley raised his bottle. "You torched the bridge and danced on the ashes." Julian clinked his bottle against his friend's. "She chose this. They both did." As the night wore on, they talked about work, Wesley's new girlfriend, a hiking trip they were planning for the summer, normal things, future things, life continuing beyond the wreckage of betrayal. Later, after Wesley had gone, Julian stood at his window, looking out at Riverside skyline. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the lights into watery smears of color. A fitting metaphor, he thought, for how the clear picture of his life with Valerie had dissolved into something unrecognizable. Yet here he was, still standing, stronger, perhaps, than he had been before. More cautious, certainly, but more aware of his own resilience. He thought of Diana, who had called earlier to tell him she was heading to Valmont next week. A fresh start, she'd said, echoing his own thoughts, away from the scandal, the memories. Julian touched the window glass, cool against his fingertips. The city beyond seemed full of possibilities now, unburdened by the weight of lies and compromised dreams. Valerie's life lay in ruins, her career, reputation, and freedom all at risk. His mission was complete, but it wasn't merely revenge that filled him as he turned away from the window. It was something lighter, cleaner, a sense of justice served, of balance restored, and beneath that, the first fragile tendrils of freedom. Not just from Valerie and her betrayal, but from the person he had been when he loved her, too trusting, too blind, too willing to ignore the signs. He would never be that person again. Never forgive such a betrayal. Never allow himself to be so thoroughly deceived. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city clean. Inside, Julian Flynn began to rebuild his life, piece by careful piece, stronger at the broken places.